Welcome to the Cuttercast, presented by Canvas Cutter, where we leave chaos for campfires and trade deadlines for dirt roads. We dive into hunting stories, outdoor adventures, and the gear that lets you live life outside. Kick back and let's get into it to determine whether I got it.
We did have a friend that drew two, actually. They made him choose.
The same year?
Yeah. He drew a Bookcliff's muzzleloader tag and then a Vernon rifle tag.
What did he go with?
Bookcliff's muzzleloader. Killed like a 210.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of Justin's best friends.
We need a mathematician to do the statistical probability of that.
Oh, it's unreal. It's not.
Because it's pretty unreal to get a tag, but to get two in the same years.
It's not. It breaks the rules somehow.
It does break the rules. Yeah. We don't break the rules, though. Not here. No way. Well, welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Cuttercast. It's yours truly, Seth here. And I am joined tonight again with our in-house hunt expert, Kyle Paxman. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, you bet.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about those late-season mule deer hunts and some tactics that will hopefully help our listeners find more success and enjoy their time out there. Late season hunts can be challenging in comparison to others with like weather. The deer have had a lot more pressure. Their habits seem to have changed, at least from to be really honest, it's been recent since I've gotten a lot more into mule deer hunting. I've always appreciated it. I've done it my whole life. Don't get me wrong. I've shot mule deer. I've hunted mule deer my whole life. But my dad's limited entry tag and going on that and consistently, like almost on a daily basis, seeing really big deer.
Yeah.
Like calling mid 170 bucks small. I got the bug.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I get why people love mule deer hunting. And so that has had an effect on me the last, 6 or so years since then. But it's also exciting because for most of the hunts, you've got a rifle and the deer seem to be moving more, well, with weather, right? But we're going to dive into it.
Sounds good.
You've got some experience with it. With these conversations that Kyle and myself have, they're often connected to an article that Kyle has written. Kyle writes a lot of really awesome articles that you can find at canvascutter.com. And we'll have a link of that in the show notes if you want to go read some awesome articles and learn a lot and improve your knowledge and skill level to find more success out in the field. You can do that. Kyle is a breadth of experience and knowledge, and we're grateful that he's willing to share that with us.
I'm old.
He's not that old. He's not that old. So to start it off, you mentioned migration routes. Tell us, like, what do you mean when you're talking about migration routes, and why in these later season hunts is that something you should probably focus on or look for?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of it, I think, again, is like we've talked in previous discussions, is understanding the unit that you're in.
Right.
Right. So a lot of the late season hunts, typically Colorado, right? You're hunting second, third, fourth seasons. A lot of those deer move substantial distance from summer to winter range. Wyoming's in the same boat, right? A lot of the Utah herds as well migrate between summer and winter. And so I think it's understanding what those corridors are, how they use them, and when they use them. Examples that I think people are probably really familiar with is the Paunsaugunt, right? Once the acorns drop, the deer leave the top.
Yep.
And usually, first, second week of September, those deer are piling off and heading to the desert. It doesn't necessarily have to be a
cold
snow event,
or
right?
Something, yeah.
Whereas in Colorado, I think deer start moving more with snow, weather, and pressure. Mm-hmm. But I've seen it even in Wyoming. Some of the high country deer, we've had deer that we've hunted, and they're there, and they're there, and they're there, and all of a sudden they disappear. And I think what happens is that they start sensing it's time to migrate, and they starting on their journey early.
How early do
I would think,
normally...
some of those stuff early Wyoming, I think I've seen them start as early as probably, 8th to the 10th of October, depending on where they're at in the elevation chain.
So in a lot of states, those rifle hunts, like you're starting to get potentially some of that early migration.
Yeah, you'll have deer start using it for sure. And I think it just depends on, how big of a hurry they're in. If they sense there's weather coming or cold, or the rut starts heating up a little bit, they'll start moving quicker.
And some units, they're moving out of the state or into the state even, right?
Sure.
So you could hunt a unit that borders like a really good unit of a neighboring state and just hunt it knowing that with weather or certain circumstances, you're going to get some of those bigger bucks migrating into your unit, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think so. That's probably step one, is really understanding the unit you're hunting and the characteristics that happen there. Again, the biologist can help with that. The Onyx has all that mapped. If you know how to turn those layers on, it will show you migration directions and corridors. Certain states publish that, some of them don't, and so you can get that off websites and things like that. The thing that we do a lot is look at, where do we see big deer that winter here, and where do we think they summer? And you start kind of trying to connect the dots and look at natural funnels within those dots that, like, hey, I'm going to go look in this funnel to see if deer pile through this. Obviously in Colorado, like typically it snows second, third, fourth season. And so you can really start looking for those line trails coming out of the high country.
Right, yeah.
And, follow or glassing where they're going and trying to find what elevation the deer are on from that.
That's super, super helpful. Something I've actually never done before. Makes a ton of logical sense to me. I do know that on the extended archery unit here in Utah, I've had a few opportunities to go up. A buddy of mine hunts it a lot, knows it really well. And I've been wading through waist deep snow, trying to put a stock in on a buck. And he's up above me, rutting does. And I'm wondering what on earth they're doing up there. Like, don't know what they're eating. I don't know. Why don't they want to party, down lower? And maybe eventually they will, because I do know also you do see a ton of deer coming out of those canyons into the lower foothills. But I'll never forget that. I was just like miserable, wading through waist deep snow, trying to get in on this deer. And of course well, I shouldn't say of course, but it didn't work. And I was just thinking the whole time making this stock, like, what are you doing up here?
I've seen that too. And I think a lot of that, at least here in the Wasatch Front, is probably pressure related, where they stay away from people a little bit more. And
they'll deal with it.
Yeah. So I don't know. Every deer has its own personality, right?
Yeah,
but I think in a lot of these later season hunts, you're really looking for what is this herd unit doing and where, should I be focusing?
Yeah, I love that. That's so calling biologists, some states publish that. And then, of course, you've got Onyx and other hunt map applications that have that. A lot of that information, at least,
right,
to give you a foundation.
Sure, and a ton of it again is experience in the field,
right?
This is where we talked about hunting units repeatedly, or they just having experience repeatedly in the units, so this is what these deer do when X happens. When it snows a foot in this mountain pass, I can count on the deer being down here.
Right.
And so we hunt northern Idaho quite a bit, and we gauge it by that as well, kind of knowing, hey, it has snowed up here, the deer will be moving down. Interestingly enough, though, I think there's always the deer that move without the snow.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So there's that part of it. I mean, there's, we used to go film on the Wyoming Gun Range a lot, and so we started going earlier and earlier to see, how soon are they getting here?
Yeah.
And surprisingly, they're there. They start filtering in the third week of October.
Really?
And so that kind of proves my point that these deer that are migrating 100 miles, they're not starting when the snow flies, or they would never make it.
A lot earlier than you would think.
Yeah.
That's That is super fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to be super amazed, go look at some of the Wyoming research that's been done. I think they have some Facebook pages, but it shows does that they've collared, right, that are summering like in the Tetons, and they go clear to like the Red Desert.
Well, I was listening to a biologist where they had collared a doe here in Utah, and she went over like 2 or 3 mountain ranges to go to Arizona Strip to winter.
Yeah, they're goofy.
And like
it's really odd.
She wasn't like going around it. She was just going straight up and over, straight up and over. Yeah. And one year, I guess, she did it, and for whatever reason, she came back like halfway and then went. Mm-hmm. But it's like, why? Yeah, it's because weird. Between where she started and where she ends up, there's winter range that deer do use. It's just, it's fascinating.
And sometimes they're consistent, and other times, for whatever reason, whether it's health or range conditions, they short or long migrate or start earlier or later. And so there are a lot of variables there. But I think when we're talking about hunting, from the end of October to mid-November, you're trying to key on where are the masses headed, and how do I intercept them if they're not there.
Super random question, but do you know or have you read anything? Will bucks go to the winter range their mom took them to when they were a fawn, or do they start developing their own spot, kind of like a bull going to rut in a different area to,
I think I've heard that, and I think that's probably, I'd have to do some confirming, but I think that's what I have read and heard, is they typically follow where their mother took them. Mm-hmm. So there's a genetic kind of disposition that you're ingrained to do this route. And I think they keep repeating that, and I think a lot of that is some of the survival of the fittest, right?
Yeah,
they are bred into knowing where do I need to go to live, and what are my best chances of survival, and it's doing this route. Yeah.
Super fascinating. Okay, so check out migration routes. I need to do that more. That's actually, I geek out on that stuff, so that sounds fun and something I've never done. And haven't heard a ton of hunters doing it, but it sounds like it would greatly increase the chances of intercepting in one of those funnels, because there's also like the topography of the area creates natural migration funnels. It seems to me, I could be wrong, and so if you know that this is a corridor that deer are migrating through, to find places to glass in those funnels be super successful.
Yeah, for sure. And we've done that a lot in Colorado, where you'll get big snowstorms and you'll start seeing the deer filing out. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they'll be in a single file line, right? They're just marching.
Yeah, legitimately.
And it's pretty awesome to watch. Like I've seen groups, I don't know, we saw a group in Wyoming one year that it was probably like the 8th or 10th of October. But there was 80 deer in a line.
Oh my gosh.
And it snowed like 18 inches, and they were like, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I've hunted them that way a little bit, where I don't know, we had an old timer in the desert once that we kept seeing just tons of migration tracks. And he's like, if you're seeing big trails of deer moving out, don't bother tracking those, because you're not going to catch them. He's like, look for the random tracks that are resident deer that are living here. But, you see these giant, a lot of places, but southern Utah specifically, you'll see 2-foot wide
paths,
trends through the sand, and just hundreds of deer have moved down this trail, and it's like, where are all these things, and they all go to Arizona, but it's fascinating to watch how many deer move through country like that.
That is awesome. Next point, covering country. Now, I love that you bring this one up. A guy here locally that I respect a lot, especially when it comes to mule deer hunting. He's killed a lot of big mule deer. He has children that he's taken, and he's got daughters that have killed bigger mule deer than I've seen. And just a stud. But he'll go into units he's never hunted and kill a giant. And I asked him, like, what are you doing? And it is basically this. He get on a road, look for tracks, like, cover country. When you see a big track, go follow it for a while. Go glass that area. Like, what is that? And he finds a lot of success. When you talk about covering country, what What are you covering it with glass, covering it with the truck, both?
Both. Yeah. I think a lot of it depends on certain circumstances that are happening, like, have I been scouting? Do I have something found?
Know the unit?
Exactly. A lot of the new units, I'm doing that very thing where it's like, let's drive as much of it as we can, or hit glassing points as much as we can, and really start kind of categorizing what we feel is 1, 2, 3, and what does it look like. And, there's always those outliers of like, I don't think this gets touched. Maybe there's a giant that lives here, but is it high probability?
Right.
Probably not. Right. And so you kind of have to make those judgment calls, but I do it both ways. We used to, when we hunted Colorado third season a lot, we would go a day early. And so we would spend time kind of covering as much of our favorite haunts as we could to see if we could find a giant. And then a lot of that was really driving and glassing. I think people take for granted how much you can really see with good optics.
Yeah.
I'm not looking a couple hundred yards, right? With today's optics, you can see miles.
You can.
And you can see enough to tell me that's a deer I need to go look at, or those aren't worth, walking 2 miles over there.
Yep.
And so I think people get afraid to really look long distance, but, like I have a Swaro 95, and 2 or 3 miles isn't that big a deal for me. Especially if there's snow on the ground, right? The deer stand out. Yep. You can tell kind of what's going on. You can tell body characteristics and at least frame. So we do that quite often, where we're driving around and glassing from the road. We've kind of found over the years that, I love to hike into areas, especially if they are a little more remote or they show promise. But really, when you're doing that, you're investing a bunch of time and energy. Whereas, in the truck, you can cover an enormous amount of ground. And I think your odds go up a little bit to find something next level, just for the sheer fact that you're covering so much more terrain.
Which is super fascinating. Again, that goes right along with kind of what he shared with me is you're covering far more terrain, which is going to increase your chances of finding something by glassing from the road and driving the road. But also, he mentioned he feels like a lot of guys actually hike past good deer.
For sure.
To go into spots they hope other hunters aren't. And that big buck's just in this canyon 200 yards off this road.
For sure.
And he's content being there because he hears vehicles, but nobody bugs him. They're all going past him.
Yeah.
And it's just super interesting because I know several individuals that have killed really good deer, and they were really close to major roads.
I think it goes back to it was the last podcast, the one before, we're talking about pockets, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think, for deer to get mature these days, they have to be in places that are not the normal almost, right? Yep. Especially here in Utah, tight guys are too good. There are too many guys that are willing, we call it strapping on the nitro, right? It's from the movie Vertical Limit, where the guy puts nitroglycerin on his back and climbs Everest to try to save him, right? But anyway, there are a lot of guys that are really aggressive these days. And so the mindset that we used to have when I was young is like, we're just going to out-hike everybody. And that doesn't work anymore. Like, there's too many folks that are...
Oh, I grew up doing that.
Yeah.
Work harder, not smarter was how we hunted.
Yeah, and I think that's changed a lot these days, where a bunch of people have fancy equipment. A bunch of people are willing to really bivouac in somewhere.
Yeah.
Back in the early days of hunting Wyoming, there weren't a lot of guys backpack hunting. And that's changed entirely. Like, you cannot get away from people. It's
become a really trendy thing, which is a whole other topic. And I don't mean to bag on it, because I do respect it and I think it's awesome. But I also feel like there's some places in Idaho and Wyoming. I guess there's a few spots in maybe every state. I've tried to think of Utah, and I really don't know of a spot in Utah. But this whole hunting the back country, like what's considered back country? Because I know individuals that talk about, they went on this back country hunt and they hiked 3 miles into a spot and camped, and they're in these canyons, but 2 miles away is another road.
Yeah.
And I hike more than that, but I just come back to a base camp. So was I hunting the back country, or like what's considered back country? Sure. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean to bag on it, but it's kind of like this really popular, trendy thing, and I don't necessarily think it's the most effective all the time.
No, I think it can be, and I think, and I talk about this in the article a little bit. I think it's really experience teaches you to read the situation. Right. It's like, hey, we've been grinding and we've had hunts like this in Colorado third season where tons of pressure, deer haven't migrated. What do we got to do?
Right.
And usually in those situations, it's like, well, let's get to glassing points that give us a very big advantage, whether that's from the vehicle or, shorter hikes that we can really put optics to work. Because I think the thing that I do feel like, at least me and my friends have an advantage, and you probably fall into this as well, is that people don't have the patience a lot of times, and they don't glass to the level that they should.
Yep.
And I think that's what sets people that are consistently successful apart from those that get lucky occasionally.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. Glassing.
Yeah.
It's again, it's something I developed as I've grown as a hunter. I didn't grow up glassing. Like my dad had a spotting scope. We would glass, but a lot of the glassing was scouting, like preseason. Once the hunt was on and we knew deer were in the area, we went and like still hunted the area. Yeah. And our glassing was like, pulling up your binos and checking little spots and then hiking, and you'll see something. And we had success, but as I developed, and then again, especially with my dad's limited entry, where you find a peak and you sit there all day.
Yeah.
And you see things.
No, for you do.
And like you mentioned earlier, my favorite piece of glass, I've got 15s, and my dad had his Swaro spotting scope, and I found that I could see a lot more with my 15s instead of through this one-eyed optic. My eyes didn't get sore, and there were rarely cases where I couldn't see that cheater that he could see.
Right.
Or I would be like, Dad, does he have this on his left side? Yeah. Can you see that? Yeah. Like when it hits the sun, I noticed that. And so, and like you say, you can glass miles, plural. Yeah. And actually see well enough to determine if you should go after it or not. But I gained an appreciation and a love for picking a spot and glassing all day. And growing up, it was like you go in the morning, glass, and you hunt. And if you don't get anything, you come back and hang out and wait for evening. Yeah. But my hunting's completely changed to where it is an all-day thing, and I actually love glassing the afternoon. There's a lot of action in the morning, but things kind of die down, and I find glassing into those shadows, glassing into what looks like an area that they should bed in. I turn up a lot more deer than I ever have in my life by glassing throughout the afternoon. Sure. Yeah. And then as you've mentioned, Schaefer calls it the 1 o'clock stretch, but it's crazy, especially with elk, but I see mule deer do it too. It's like 12:30, 1 o'clock, they're getting up and they rebed, they feed a little bit. And you got to be patient. Sorry, you should be the one talking.
No, you're good. I love it.
I've found the more patient and consistent I am, like even though I glass this area thoroughly, if I come back to it 30 minutes later, I will find something that I didn't see because of that, because they got up and rebedded or they were feeding, and I'm like, oh, there's a buck. And had I been like, oh, I glassed that for 20 minutes, like there's nothing there. Yeah. I've never had a spot where there was nothing there. I just didn't see it the first, within the first hour or two.
Yeah. I mean, a quick story about that. So I think, I don't know, one of the last times. So I hunted Colorado a ton, from like 2003 to about 2020, almost every year, second or third or fourth season. But one of the last few years that I went, I haven't gone for 5 or 6 years just because of point changes and other tags and things like that. But anyway, we'd gone out and hunted the morning, hadn't seen a whole lot. So we just decided I'm going to sit on this point all day in the truck. And we are big fantasy football players. And so it was Sunday. So we sat there and I'm like, I'm going to glass these timber strips, coming off this ridge, and we'll just sit here for a while. And we were waiting for some other friends to show up. Anyway, probably 2 hours later, I caught a buck rebedding. And, I looked at the patch 20 or 30 times. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing to remember is that sun shifts. It's hitting their beds differently, right? As it changes angles, and they will move to do that. And like you said, a lot of times this buck got up. He was on his feet maybe 2 minutes, but it was enough to be like, oh, geez, there is one. And he was in a pocket of pines. It's like that thing. If we wanted to kill it, it's dead.
Yep.
It wasn't a giant. And so we called my cousin. It's like, hey, we've got one bedded. Get over here. And he came over and we got it killed. And so I think there's a ton of, especially tying it back to kind of what we're talking about, this time of year where you've got deer that are staging for the rut, especially if it is cold.
Yes.
Deer need to feed more. The bucks, even the does, they are active more because they're prepping for winter.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a lot where if you'll glass all day, these big deer will get up. They may not leave the pocket that they're in.
Right. Yeah.
But they will get up and stretch and feed for, multiple minutes to half an hour and then rebed. And they may do that a couple of times from noon to dark.
Yeah.
We've had it a couple times. Another story I talked about in the article is the unit we hunt in Colorado does tons of pressure. It is absurd. It's insane. That's when we kind of stopped going as it kind of got killed out, we felt. But anyway, we were on a point glassing, and it was probably noon, and deer were up and active. Mm-hmm. It was freezing cold. My voice is rough tonight. But I picked up a buck rutting does in this little draw. And as I'm watching him and looking at him, like, that's a pretty substantial deer. We ought to try to figure out how to get there. 2 guys come over the ridge, see him, shoot at him 4 or 5 times, miss him, and we watch him run literally probably 2 miles flat out through sagebrush rolling hills and left the does and disappeared into kind of the last draw we could see.
Yeah.
And I'm like, those guys have no clue where that deer went. We got to go over there and see if we can turn him back up. And so, we made the big circle around, got in position, started kind of glassing the coulee that we thought he'd gone into. And about an hour before dark, sure enough, he stood up. He was on his feet all of probably a minute, turned around in his bed and laid back down. But it gave him up, right? Yeah. And had we not kind of been in position and glassing at a time of day that, you may not have really thought about it. High noon, a lot of the guys are sitting at McDonald's.
Yep.
Well, we turned this buck up, watched him get missed, watched where he ran, got back in position.
And have an opportunity.
And killed him.
Last year on the rifle hunt, we had first thing in the morning watching a bunch of deer, had 2 bucks come into this canyon, and we lost sight of them. So we decided to drop off this ridge, repositioned, found them again, and glassed them. And it had snowed the night before, and they were in some really steep country, and they were borderline general season, like worth it for me. Mm-hmm. And good bucks, but Father Wisdom wasn't super excited about them, and especially the work that it would take if we're going to go. But while we were glassing and watching them, I picked up a deer bedded probably 1.5 miles away under a pine tree, and he got up and started feeding. Well, it was perfect, but he started feeding, and he actually was a pretty good buck. We probably should have gone after him, but my point is, after about 20 minutes of feeding, I watched him rebed, and he was out in the opening, but out in an opening, but with the oak behind him. If I did not see him bed right there, I would never pick him out.
Yeah.
Because even I went back and started glassing these deer, and I went back and looked in that spot, and it took me a couple minutes to pull him out again.
Right.
Because he blended in so well, and he was in a little opening, but with the oak behind him and a log in front of him, it was really hard to pull him out. And had I not found him earlier, I would have glassed that spot like multiple times and been like, there's nothing there.
Right.
But there was actually a really good buck there. So yeah,
I mean, it's, I think glassing is a huge success tool. And I think people,
think so too.
I don't know, especially I don't know what our younger generation is, but some of the younger guys that I know, they're just too ADHD.
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
It's like, I got to get over this next hill. I got to go this next hill. And it's like, no, sit down and put the glass to work.
Let the glass go over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you get a dirt bag.
Exactly.
You get a good drink and some snacks. And you should be able to glass for a while, especially if you have some good company.
No, and the thing to remember is, and we talked about this at Scotia, but especially when deer are migrating, glass all day long.
Right.
Like I've seen them in the middle of the day be in a line going down ridges.
Yeah.
And
it's a good point.
Guys go back to camp, take a nap or whatever else, right? But and I love a good nap, but when deer are moving, you've got to be on the hill.
So before we get into, and you brought it up with your Colorado hunt, checking does. Before we look at that hunt pressure, what do you mean by that? Like leaning into like this unit has a lot of pressure, this unit doesn't. Like how can you use pressure to your advantage? Yeah,
and I think, a big chunk there is get a gauge for what people are doing and how they're hunting it. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to, a lot of units you go to that are high profile, you can kind of tell who you're dealing with pretty fast.
Yeah.
And, I think when you're glassing long range, you see guys all over and you kind of tell the people that kind of know what they're doing and those that are just taking a gun for a walk. Right.
Yeah.
But the thing to remember, and I told this story in the article as well, that people that are taking a gun for a walk, they're going to move deer.
Yeah.
And so being in position where you can see the deer moving away from them is super advantageous.
Yep.
In the article, I told the story about another third season Colorado hunt. In fact, it was the same one as the previous one where we watched them miss this buck. But anyway, we were back in an area and it was super oaky and pretty thick sage and a few little aspen draws and whatnot. And we were glassing and there were a lot of deer around, but I just didn't see a buck that I was interested in. And about midday, this dude comes dragging this sled through the snow and sagebrush with a small 4-point on it, just making a ruckus.
Right.
And I'm watching him. He's a mile and a half away from us, and he's moving deer right and left. And he kind of was angling towards us a little bit. And as it got closer and closer, he kind of got to the last big oaky draw. And sure enough, giant buck popped out and ran kind of angling to us. And I was able to kill him.
That's so awesome.
I think pressure can be super frustrating because it's hard to get away from guys.
Yeah.
But I think learning how to use it to your advantage can also be great. Like we've talked before, I'm big on talking to people.
Yeah.
A lot of Colorado that you have to understand is that there are tons of guys that have elk tags in their pocket. And those guys don't care about deer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'll usually tell you, oh yeah, I saw a big deer over here. You got to go look for it. And so that's something to always remember.
That is something I have got to learn because you're good at it. Father Wisdom is like the king. Yeah. He's talking to everybody. And I'm too young and dumb to recognize the opportunity. I'm like, what are you doing here glassing? Like you saw us glassing. Why did you just pull up? Father Wisdom's like, sweet, I'm going to go talk to this guy. And he almost always comes back with information that ends up helping us.
Yeah.
Where my ignorant, like, stuck up young butt is too ignorant to be like, I'm more like thinking he's competing with me rather than like, no, he's a good dude out hunting too. He probably knows it better than you. So go talk to him.
No, for sure. And I think, like for me, I'm usually pretty careful with what I tell people.
Yeah.
But, I'm all for the sportsman being sportsmanlike, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where we get in trouble as a hunters a little bit, is we get too worried about the competition side and it becomes too us against them.
Yes.
Instead of really thinking through, well, they're here trying to get the same thing out of this I am. You know, and I've even worked with people sometimes of like, hey, what are you guys going to do so we don't go do that? And,
Right, yeah.
you know, and they may or may not know the same animals there that you're trying to hunt, but yeah, it's helpful. You know, pressure sucks because big deer are smart enough, and so it's hard to have the wily buck and then dealing with a bunch of guys as well. But I've seen it go both ways. You know, like I just talked about the one that pressure helped me kill a big deer.
Just down there flushing them all out for you.
Yeah, he was being a good bird dog. And, you know, and the other thing that I've thought about, and you think about how the old timers hunted, they didn't have fancy optics. They didn't glass. They pushed them.
Small scopes. Yep.
Right. They did deer drives like you would not believe. Yeah. And I don't know. There's some logic there, right? Yeah. We've done it. I'm trying to think if we've killed deer that way. Like I think we have killed a couple, but you know, the conditions have to be correct. Like you can't. Usually, I don't have 20 guys with me, right? And so it's like, hey, here's a 300-yard aspen patch. Let's go push it.
Yeah.
And those types of scenarios is more opportunistic that we're trying to push through.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas the old timers, they would line up 30 of their grandkids and push the cedar trees.
Whole family push. Yeah.
Put the guys on the end and don't shoot each other, right?
Yeah.
But there's some logic there, I think.
When it comes to things are changing. Bucks are checking does. They're starting to stage for the rut, and some could be rutting already.
Yeah.
Why focus on does? I think I just answered it. But what are you doing to find does? Yeah. And if you find a group of does, are you focusing in on them, or just like, there's does here, so likely there could be a buck coming around?
Some of both. You know, I think it depends on what else you're seeing while glassing. You know, if you're seeing bucks that are active or cruising, you know, in the snow, you can definitely tell big buck tracks that are cruising.
Right.
Right. You'll see a big single track, and it's just moving and meandering, and it's looking for does. And so if you're seeing that mentality, then yes, I pay a lot of attention to the does. Typically, if there's pressure around, the bucks, I think, will breed the does in the dark. And I think, we were talking about this even before the podcast started, I think deer are getting bred a lot earlier than people think they are. You know, like, we talked about this, but one of my biologist buddies is like, yeah, gestation period for does is 205 days. It's almost like clockwork. And so depending on where you're at in the country, it's still 205 days. And so Utah's average, right, that puts the peak of the rut, I think it's like November 13th, 15th, something like that, for when those does are giving birth in June. And you can kind of start doing that math and looking at, well, all these fawns are born the third week of June. That means peak of the rut is Thanksgiving, and kind of start looking at that. But, you know, I think most of the fawns are born, you know, the end of May to the first 10, 12 days of June.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a good guideline to look at. Well, that means those does are getting bred the second week of November.
Yeah.
Well, most all of Colorado's hunts are right there.
In that time, right?
It doesn't have to be a fourth season tag to have rut activity.
Right.
And so kind of where we've had success is that we find does with timber nearby, and then we tear apart the timber that's by them. Because a lot of times what happens is those bucks they'll be close, but due to pressure or the does aren't quite ready, they're staged up, kind of keeping an eye on the does and checking, you know, the wind and everything else that they do to tell when that doe's ready. They slip in, do their business. You know, they may hang out there, but there's a bunch of people around. I think they leave them.
Which runs into another topic is of prime time. Like, are you referring to those like dawn, dusk?
Yeah, I am. You know, something I've really learned the last handful of years is that I've seen deer not get up, right? Like you'll have them spotted and you'll watch them, and prime time will come and go and they don't blink, right? And so I think that's something that I'm talking about a little bit is it's twofold. I think you've got to be glassing actively at prime time. A lot of times when they do get up, it will be the last 10 minutes.
Yes. Yep.
I've had so many guys that I have talked to or hunted with over the years that it's like, no, I need to be back at the truck when it's getting dark because I don't want to walk with my headlamp, right? And I'm like,
that's
well,
why you have a headlamp, though.
Yeah, I get it. We're a long ways away from where we need to be, but if we really believe this deer is on this hill, if he's going to stand up,
that's the
it's
time.
going to be right now.
Yep.
And so, I think you've really got to dial in focus that last hour of the day, especially. Typically, I think mornings are usually a little better come rut
I agree
timelines.
too. Yeah.
I've seen it countless times in second and third season Colorado that deer at the end of the day do not get out of their beds. I don't know if it's pressure related. That's my guess, is that they sense the hunters in the woods and they
You
go
say
a bit
that,
more
and
nocturnal.
even in like Utah's rifle hunt, I feel like I see that.
Yeah.
Deer a lot more active in the morning and for a longer period of time, like going to bed a little later than normal.
Right.
But getting up really late or not at all.
Yeah,
which is super interesting.
It is to me, and
you said that, and I just realized. Yeah,
I
I've
don't
seen
know.
that.
Like if it's my guess is pressure related. That throughout the night hours they're more active and they're doing their thing, and that carries into the morning longer. But then as guys are tearing all over the place and hiking around and making noise, they kind of like ease off and like, I'm going to back off. In fact, I had a deer this year that, I was sitting a water hole and with my bow praying this big deer came in, and he didn't. But some deer had come in the morning and winded us from the wrong side, and they kind of looped way around us, went up on the hill. Anyway, those same deer came out at night, and this was in August. This surprised me. But I think they knew something was wrong with their water source. And so I watched these two bucks come down the hill that had winded us that morning, and they got right above where they could see where we were at, and they laid down. And so even the first week of the bow hunt, these bucks were being super cautious and kind of tuned in. Something's not quite right with my water source. I'm going to wait till dark to go to it. So I think we take for granted how smart they get, how quickly.
Well, I don't know about you, but I know early summer scouting, being out there and it's quiet and I don't see a lot of people. And then the hunts come and you're hearing razors all over the place. There's no way they don't pick up on that. Like for me, who's like hard of hearing, like I can pick up on the noise difference. It has to be dramatically louder to them.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that's part of it. And I don't know. I've just seen it time and time again. And I think, I've never really had a hunt that was true, like full blown rut fest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've definitely had hunts that deer were rutting or acting ruddy, and we've killed some of those deer. But I think we've killed more bucks that have been staged up within quarter to a half mile of the does than bucks like in with the does rutting.
Yeah. So maybe, good advice. If you find a group of good does, it could be, the bedding areas around where those are, not necessarily just right there in that pocket with them.
No, and I think it's really focusing on the cover that is near the does.
Okay, that makes sense. The last one we're going to touch on here is one that I'm super intrigued by, but in the area that I hunt the most, there's not a lot of opportunity for this, but agriculture.
Yeah.
And agriculture fields as a food source, and using those in late season hunts. I think a lot of people, I've become better at keying in on, like recognizing it when I'm scouting and keying in on those areas all year round. But late season, what are you looking at there?
So kind of the same thing as you would earlier. I think to think about it.
Do you think it gets better late season just because food's so important? Like winter's coming on, we don't want to starve.
Yeah, if you think about whitetail hunters, right?
Yeah.
The whitetail guys kill giant deer when the weather turns cold.
Yep.
And they're coming into the food source to feed, right?
That's true.
I think there's some truth that with the mule deer as well. Like I've seen it in numerous places, countless times, where if the alfalfa is still green-ish, they would much rather eat that than be browsing sagebrush.
Sagebrush, yeah.
Right? And so I think that is a huge thing that it gets overlooked a lot of times. And if you go run a spotlight any time of the year on ag fields, you'll be surprised what's there.
They've got to be.
And you'd have no idea that all those deer are around, even in low-lying sagebrush areas. They come for miles to hit the food source.
Yeah, which again for us, that's another really good point that I don't know how many people key in on, but for a deer or an elk to go 3 miles to eat is nothing. It's literally minutes for them.
Yeah.
And so to go to the buffet and have a really good lunch and then go back to bed, like several miles is nothing to them. And I think sometimes we make it like it's a big deal, but it's not.
No, it's not. And again, it goes back to corridors a little bit, right? And starting to look at, because typically the ag is private, right?
Yeah.
And so you're starting to look at, well, how do I get between the ag and where these deer are coming and going from?
Yep.
And starting to realize that maybe that is miles away. But you start looking at funnels that funnel to the ag, or cover that is above the ag. Like, where are these deer going to bed that are feeding in the ag?
Yep.
All those types of things you really ought to be taking note of.
Yeah.
Like I did it this year on the last day of the muzzleloader hunt again. You know, I had a deer that I missed last year and I was hoping he was alive. And so we went and sat there again, you know, about a mile above the ag, and I watched 100 deer file by me the last hour of daylight. He wasn't there, unfortunately, but it's insane. And they go quick. Like they're on the fast walk typically, you know, they're kind of feeding, but they cover the ground pretty quickly.
Oh yeah.
Because they know Tucanos is down the hill. They're marching, right?
Yeah, and winter's coming.
Yeah.
Oh, those poor things. Well, thank you so much for those tactics. Just to recap them, we've got migration, movement, and keying in on those corridors, migration corridors, covering country efficiently, both with glass and your vehicle. I think that's a pretty big one. I know we joke about, you know, being a road hunter, but you know, it can be effective. Not that you never get out of the truck, but like, anyways, covering country, using does as a locator, not necessarily that you just like zone in on the does, but like, here's a group of does. It's that time of year. Maybe let's check this area out a little closer. Glassing, being more disciplined with your glassing, glass longer throughout the day. Huge fan of that. I love glassing. I find it to be enjoyable, and I see more when I do it. Managing pressure to your advantage, as frustrating as it is seeing a bunch of orange hats out on the hill. Just recognize there are a lot of individuals that take rifles for walks, and you can actually get in a situation where they're pushing deer for you. Like, follow them and watch the deer run around. And then targeting ag as a food source and getting in that zone. Don't go hunt private property. That's not what we're suggesting. But definitely recognizing those opportunities and setting up in a spot where you can get them in a funnel or as they head there. Anything else? Is that it?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I think it's a super exciting time of the year to hunt because you never know. It's kind of the one thing that's hard to scout for months in advance because deer are on the move.
Yep.
Right.
Moving.
You're hunting them as they're migrating or as they arrive to the winter range. And so that's pretty hard to scout other than right at that time period.
Yep. And
usually it changes every day. And so I think that's where like persistence and really grinding things out typically pays off. You know, especially in Colorado where the dates, you know, grow later, the longer you're there, the rut intensifies, the weather hopefully comes. You know, a lot of guys come for a day or two and take off, and usually the hunt gets better towards the end.
Yep.
And so I think being persistent in that regard is another big takeaway of man, it's that time of year. You never know when the giant shows up to check the does.
Yeah.
Or the giant migrates into the canyon, you know.
And it doesn't have to be weather induced.
No.
So that's another huge point. Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
Again, if you want to read more articles like what we just discussed today, go to canvascutter.com. We'll have a link to those in the show notes. Check them out. If you like what you're hearing, please take time, leave us a review. That's huge. Always like and follow. Subscribe if you are watching it. And until next time,
Awesome.
keep on keeping on.
Thanks.
Thank you.